Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Tasia, but you can also call me Tay, and welcome in. I'm so excited to have you here. So we are back on Gardenia once again, doing another speed build. Today we are going to be working on the museum. Now it took me a minute to really figure out how I would do the museum because I'm kind of running out of space on this section of the island, and I ended up with a pretty long rectangular area of space that I thought would be perfect for the museum. So that is what we're doing, but before we get into it, I would greatly appreciate if you could like and subscribe. I would love to have you guys join this community that we are building here. So let's go ahead and hop on over to where we're building. I have this bridge that leads over to this rectangular space as I mentioned, and here I've already placed the museum. I feel like this is a pretty grand entrance, which is perfect because I feel like the museum needs a grand entrance for this kind of theme. And I think we're gonna just do a long walkway with a pretty elegant fountain in the middle. Alright, so I'm going to start this build off with some pathing, of course, like usual. And I'm also fencing off this area with the hedge fencing. I want it to feel tucked in like most of the sections of this island. And I'm just going to let the speed build play as I kind of explain my thought process for this build. But essentially I came up with a few different ideas for how this build could turn out. I originally wanted to do some kind of like statue garden. I thought that would be very fitting for the museum, but I just didn't have the space that I was envisioning for the type of statue garden I wanted, and I did try out a few different things, but I ultimately decided on just putting in a statue in the very center of this build along with a fountain. I also considered making like a little hedge maze, but this area was a little too small in order to do that, so I'm once again tapping into the very elegant style of building and creating a very grand centerpiece here. So it's going to include like a little water feature, and I'm just going to have a walkway that leads along the edges of these trees. I also use these codes here that kind of look like flower boxes along this stone tile. I thought it was very pretty, tied in my color scheme as well, and just really brings out that whole floral aspect. So yeah, I'm just spending quite a bit of time working on the pathing. This is kind of me bordering off where you could walk around the edges of this museum. So as I mentioned, I wanted to include a little water feature. I thought this would be very pretty. It kind of reminds me of garden architecture that you would see in real life. Like if you visit a museum that has a garden and it kind of has those very elegant spots throughout. That's kind of the vibe I was going for with this. So I did have a few moments of trial and error with this build, but of course I cut all that out because I just wanted to show you the finished product of what this build turned out to be. So I decided to incorporate the cypress plant as kind of a different kind of plant to incorporate besides just trees and bushes and the topiaries. I thought these added a very different style and dimension to the area, so I placed those in the corners of the centerpiece, and then I also go in the back and added my flowers. I've noticed that I can get a little bit carried away when building, and I'll forget to incorporate flowers, especially when I'm building an elegant style. So I really try my best to incorporate flowers before I fill up all of the space. But I also really wanted to include more greenery and floral aspects, so I included the planters. I forget the actual name of those, but again, the white ones that kind of match my color scheme, and I wanted to include some little roses at the edge of this pond. It kind of reminds me of that scene in Hercules when Meg is singing I Won't Say I'm in Love and she's like hopping across that little pond area. I was kind of channeling that aesthetic as well, like a Greek garden kind of feel. So that's why I really loved using the beautiful statue right there, and I'm also surrounding this little centerpiece with more hedge fencing to make it very structured and elegant. Again, I don't know how many times I've said elegant in this video, but I think you get the idea. So once I kind of placed some little details around the entrance, I go back in and place the ruined pillars, and I also come back towards the front to place these Capricorn statues. I really wanted to incorporate some statues in this build, so I think I managed to do that with these two statues and then the beautiful statue in the center. I would have loved to incorporate some in between the trees on the edges, but I think that would have been a little bit too much. I think I could have pulled it off if this area was more narrow, but yeah, I decided to incorporate those statues there. And as you can see, I'm also placing in some more of this diagonal dirt path to add to the whole courtyard feel once again, and it just signifies that that's the sections that you're allowed to walk through, and I just really think it adds so much to the build. So I also go back in behind the hedge fencing and I add a few tiles here. I still haven't decided exactly what I'm going to put along the cliff here, but for now I'm just placing a few trees to kind of just block it off. In today's video I also go up behind the museum and I'm going to extend the build even further back there, which I will show you in a few minutes, but this is kind of how the museum section is turning out. I think it's so pretty, I just love it so much. It's very green and overgrown and elegant, but I did feel like something was missing. It felt a little bit too empty to me, especially along the edges of the build with the trees. So I thought of a few ideas that I wanted to have throughout the secret garden, and one of them was a butterfly garden. I didn't think I'd be able to incorporate this idea because as I mentioned, I'm kind of running out of room, but I thought I could combine my museum courtyard entrance along with the butterfly garden as well, especially since inside the museum there is a butterfly garden, and I just thought it was a perfect fit. It's like kind of when you go visit a zoo or something and you can go and see the butterflies and walk in the area where they all are. That's kind of how I was envisioning this entrance museum. So this is the butterfly garden. This is where you can walk along and see a ton of beautiful butterflies flying around. I just wish I incorporated more flowers within this build so that I could have actual butterflies flying around this area. I think that would be so amazing. But I think the butterfly models definitely give off the style that I was going for. So as I mentioned, I'm going to also be working on this little area behind the museum. Now, usually when I run into this issue of having a long rectangular section of land, I always resolve this just by making it a long land bridge. So that's what we're gonna do. I wanted to make this a very elegant land bridge. I thought this would also be perfect to add as a transition build between whatever I'm going to be putting on the left and the right ends of this build, because again, the museum's in the center, it takes up a lot of space, and I think having this bridge in the middle behind it will just bring everything together. So I use this little cobblestone path, and I'm just going to be using a lot of symmetry for this bridge. I wanted it to be kind of interactive and almost as if it's another tucked in secret area, because this is a secret garden, so I really want to have a few little nooks and crannies that you just come across and discover, and they're kind of little hidden gems throughout the garden. So that's what this is. So I did want to include some waterfalls to again make it very elegant, and I'm also going to be incorporating some castle walls as well, along with some hedge walls and fencing. So I'm using 2 bushes, I'm creating the waterfall, and using a turkey day stand here in the center to give off that very structured, elegant feel. And because I also use the cliff here, I have these subsections of squares, and I decided to create this little design, and I duplicated that within each of the square sections just because I think it's a really pretty pattern, and this is going to be like the individual centerpieces along this bridge. And these are going to be the sections that are going to be pretty identical, but each one is going to have its own style to it. So I'm just going to be working on some layering here. I first put down the curtain partition with the hedge wall fence design that I found, and I think it's perfect. I don't know why I didn't think of this before, because the curtain partition is the perfect item to kind of make it look like a long hedge wall, whereas the simple panels kind of show the color of the border, if that makes sense. Like the actual rim of the simple panel is a certain color and there isn't a green variation, so I think that using the curtain partition is a perfect solution because you don't see that line in the middle. But I did have to use 2 simple panels on the edges to fill in the gaps that you see when you're walking by in between the castle walls and arches. So I think it worked out really well. I managed to accomplish that hedge wall look that runs behind the whole bridge here, and I just really like how it turned out. But as I mentioned, I'm using a very similar pattern for all 3 of these sections. I'm just creating a hedge wall, then using the 2 decorative pillars in between, and also using the castle arches to add some extra detail, I guess. And also it just helps you see the hedge wall behind it. And I also wanted to place in some garden benches as well for little areas that you could sit and relax. And in the center, I'm going to be placing the garden door panels again, like I used in the secret garden entrance, even though you can't even get through there and the ocean is behind it. I just thought it was really cute to add that as another hidden door. And I also decided to line the bridge with the hedge fencing just to frame off this bridge. And I'm just so happy with how it turned out. It's the perfect mix of green and elegant and floral, and I just love it so, so much. So we are going to head back over to the museum and do a little walkthrough of the finished build. Here's where you enter. I added these really big butterflies in the front. I kind of like them. What do you guys think? I think they add a lot of color to the area as well. I'm not so sure if I'm going to keep them though. But here is the museum / butterfly garden. I'm really happy with how this turned out. It's definitely different from what I expected it to be. But I'm just really pleased with everything and how it came together. I think the hedges make it much more elegant and kind of give it that little maze feel, so I'm really happy with that as well. And coming up behind the museum is my elegant bridge, and here I found a lost item. I have to go and find who this belongs to. But this is my bridge. Of course, we have the castle walls and arches along with the garden benches, the waterfalls. Even though the waterfalls don't really flow into anything, I think it's justifiable in this case because I can kind of just envision it as like a fountain rather than a waterfall, I guess. So yeah, that's how the bridge turned out. So everyone, that is all for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Definitely let me know what you think of this museum entrance and the elegant bridge across the back in the comments below. I'd love to read your guys' thoughts and any ideas if I could add anything else. I'm kind of need to fill in some space that's slightly in front of this museum area, so if you have any ideas, definitely leave those in the comments for me. But I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, definitely consider giving this video a thumbs up and subscribing if you haven't already. I'd love to have you guys join this community. And with that, everyone, I hope you all have a lovely day or night. We are getting so close to finishing this island. We only have a few more builds to go, so I will see you in the next one. Bye!